Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I'm your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and today is episode 200, and we're going to take a look at the United States Department of Defense. And this one is very interesting. They have a huge budget. It's kind of shocking, and I kind of feel like they need to be audited, and they're actually supposed to be audited, but they get away with not conducting internal or external audits. And then when there are audits that are performed, they do not take the advice of the auditors, and they ignore them, and they suppress the information. So this is one of these departments where they don't like being told what to do, because they are a federal agency, they are huge, they are ginormous, and they kind of need to be told, hey, there is a checks and balance system here in the United States. Now, this federal agency is very much important because it is in regards to the it's in regards to the defense of the United States. But just because it is in regards to that matter, that doesn't mean that they can just spend our money however they want. And that is exactly what they're doing. And they've been called out on it, and they have not corrected their behavior. So again, this is a perfect example, way worse than the EPA, where a federal agency just doesn't care. It's one of those things where you have too many bureaucrats that have their hands in the pot, and they're just taking all the money out. So not a good thing. But before we dive in, let me give a big shout out to my listeners, because it is good to see you guys here. A big shout out to California, New York, Florida, Oklahoma, Georgia, Texas, Washington, Alberta, Virginia, Massachusetts, let's see here, Colorado. In terms of countries, the United States, Uzbekistan, the Russian Federation, and Canada. Good to see all of you. Okay, so again, we are discussing the United States Department of Defense. So a little bit of background. Under this name, it was formed September 18th, 1947. It was a national military establishment, but we already had kind of a Department of Defense almost from the beginning of when this country was founded. It's just that it has changed names, changed departments, and has consolidated and has tried to streamline. So you would think that if they are trying to streamline things, that would mean that they would not have so much waste and fraud. Unfortunately, they have trillions of dollars worth. I did say trillions of dollars worth of waste and fraud. Very unfortunate. Before they were called that, they were called the Department of War, and then also that was under the umbrella of the Department of the Navy. So we have these branches of our military that were developed over time. So that's one reason why the name changed. It's like as your country grows and you're learning more about how to defend your country, you have to have new types of weaponry and new types of military, and they have to be run correctly. So that's why the titles of this department change every so often. So its jurisdiction is the United States federal government, because it does defend and protect the United States. Doesn't always do a very good job of it. An example of that is 9/11. They are headquartered in the Pentagon, which is in Virginia, and that is a state in the United States. In terms of employees, they have way too many. It is ridiculous what they have. And it's just one of those things like this department should not be so large like that. This is why they're overspending. So in terms of civilian employees, meaning people that are not in the military, they have 732,079 employees. That's almost 1 million employees that are not even in the military. They're just civilian. That's ridiculous. In terms of active duty military, they have a little over 1.3 million people serving in the military, and that's active duty. So these are not retired people. So these are people that have full benefits, and they are in the military, and they may be on a base, or maybe they're going through training, things of that nature. Now, in terms of the National Guard and Reserve, which I'm not a big fan of the reserves, because I feel like they just collect a paycheck, but they don't really get out there and work, and I don't agree with that. There's 826,000 people that are in the National Guard and Reserve. Let's see here. Their annual budget as of 2020, this is ridiculous, folks. It is $721.5 billion. Billion. That's billion with a B. Okay? This is ridiculous. Now, in terms of the different agencies that are under the umbrella of the Department of Defense. It is the Department of the Department of the Army, the Navy, Air Force, the National Security Agency, the NSA. You have the Defense Intelligence Agency. You have the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which we've talked about that a little bit. And then we have the National Reconnaissance Office. So it's kind of like, they have way too many people. They just do. And it's like, they haven't really always done the best job at protecting the United States. And, our southern border is not even protected. It's just an open free-for-all. You would think our military would care about this. Like, you would think that we would have a wall, and we should have a wall. China has a wall. We are a very prosperous, very lucrative, very wonderful country, and people want to take and steal from us. And, it's dumb to not have a wall. It's just ridiculous. And to let in all these illegals. Well, our defense is nothing right now, considering how many people are illegally trespassing and entering into the United States. It's ridiculous. But a little bit of background here. It says the United States Department of Defense, also known as DOD, or US DOD, is an executive branch department of the federal government charged with coordinating and supervising all agencies and functions of the government directly related to national security, kind of a joke there, and the United States Armed Forces. The DOD is the largest employer in the world. That's true, and it's ridiculous. With over 1.4 million active duty service members, and this includes soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, and guardians. I don't know what guardians means. And that's as of 2021. DOD has stated that its mission is to provide, quote, the military forces needed to deter war and ensure our nation's security. Well, they're not even doing a good job of that. Just think about all the unnecessary wars we have had, and then when we have had necessary wars, meaning we had to intervene, there was just so much wasteful spending, and we had some very stupid people in charge of our military, and thousands of military personnel died. So this is why you don't put stupid people in charge of anything, especially your military. It says the Department of Defense is headed by the Secretary of Defense, a cabinet-level head who reports directly to the President of the United States. This is why it's very important to not have morons or idiots be your president. And right now, we have a moron and an idiot, President Biden. And I don't mean that negatively, it's just that he's not very mentally competent. And that very much concerns me because he's in charge of our military, and he appoints all these people to his cabinet. So if someone's not mentally all there, that's a big problem. That is a really big problem. Like, it would be better to have a middle schooler be in charge of the United States as opposed to President Biden, because someone in middle school knows more about the history of the United States and understands, hey, we need to keep this place safe. So he just doesn't understand some things right now. And unfortunately, it's because of his age and deterioration of his health. And again, I pray for our president. So it says here, beneath the Department of Defense are three subordinate military departments. Number one, the Department of the Army, the Department of the Navy, and the Department of the Air Force. Now, mind you, the Air Force is one of the laziest, they're just lazy, slothful people. I mean, they think they're better than other departments, and they're typically not the most physically fit people. The most physically fit people I have ever met are people that serve in the Army. Like, they bust their chops. And what's interesting is that people that serve in the Army, they're the first ones to enter any war. It is not the Navy, and it is for sure not the Air Force. Just as a reminder, what's his name? Major Nelson from I Dream of Jeannie, he was in the Air Force. So if that tells you anything about how stupid the Air Force has been, and that they're known for being kind of morons and lazy, there is a show based on the United States Air Force in the show I Dream of Jeannie. So I just think it's kind of sad, because Major Nelson was not in the Army. And he was not in the Navy. He was in the Air Force. Sorry, I laugh about that because that used to be my favorite show. And it still is a favorite show of mine, but it's, as a kid you watch it because it's cute and things like that, but then as an adult, you see the humor, the underlying, taking a jab or a poke at our Air Force, because they are some of the fattest people I've ever seen in our military. Like, they're so physically unfit, it's unbelievable. It's like, how can these people do anything to protect our country? I mean, except for our what do you call them, fighter pilots. Those guys are very fit, and most of them are guys. I don't know any women that are pilots, and I don't mean that in a sexist way. I just don't. It's usually a very daring, very masculine thing to be a pilot, because it's just, you have to be okay with using a lot of adrenaline. And typically women are not skydivers. That's just not like that. We do have pilots in like, regular commercial airlines, and that's awesome. But in terms of like the military, I've never met a woman that was a fighter pilot. It's very rare. I think when women want to be pilots in the military, they're more likely to be pilots of helicopters. And that's awesome, because helicopters, our military, they are the ones that do search and rescue for our military personnel that get hurt in other countries, and most of the time behind enemy lines. And it's usually our military helicopters that go in, and they literally can be shot down and killed in the process of trying to save our own. So they do a lot of work behind the scenes that a lot of people don't know about. But anyway, it says, so you have the Department of the Army, the Department of the Navy, and the Department of the Air Force. In addition, there are 4 national intelligence services that are subordinate to the Department of Defense, and they are the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and the National Reconnaissance Office. Other defense agencies include the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the Defense Logistics Agency, the Missile Defense Agency, the Defense Health Agency. I don't know what that means, because the military doesn't defend our health, and they get horrible health benefits from our federal government under the VA, which is basically the Veterans Administration or agency. I forget what they call it, but it's absolute crap in terms of healthcare. Excuse my language. Then there's also the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. I don't think they really did a good job, because there have been several scandals, especially when President Obama was in office. There were several Muslim people that immigrated here to the United States with the sole intention of hurting and harming Americans. And he called it workplace violence, and used all these other stupid, moronic, and lack of empathy phrases to describe this type of violence. So here we have an agency that did not even do a good job of protecting our military personnel here at home, much less civilians. So this is why you don't elect morons and idiots to public office. Because they appoint bad people. They appoint incompetent people that should never be a leader in any way, shape, or form. They appoint them to these different federal agencies and to these positions of power, or these posts within our federal government. So there is a chain of command, but if your chain of command sucks, then your chain of command means nothing. Like it's like having toddlers being in charge of your country. It's like, do you really want people that can't hardly walk or talk and are at a daycare to be in charge of your country? Well, that's basically what's happening here when you have stupid people in charge of your military and the defense of your homeland. And it's also just goes to show, like, these people don't even care that we don't have a wall at our southern border, which is ridiculous, because our southern border has been going through hell, especially since President Obama got in office and served, unfortunately, 2 terms. He was an idiot and a moron, completely incompetent, and I feel sorry for his children. Anyway, another one is the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. They suck. They haven't really helped. Then you have the Space Development Agency. I just think it's kind of stupid for us to be focusing on space when we're not even really helping our own people here on our own planet. Like, I think that if people were to visit us from another planet, I think they'd be like, what are you doing? Like, you're not even taking care of your own, but yet you're saying you care about space, like outer space and planets. It's like, you're not even doing a good job of being a good steward of what God's given you, which is planet Earth. So it's like, I just think it's a waste of money to have any kind of space program, these days, because, we've already landed on the moon, and we already have data and research for things that we know about. It's just kind of like, okay, are we not going to help the homeless? Are we not going to help low-income families or the middle class? Are we not going to reduce taxes on the rich? It's like we need to help out our people here because we are not responsible for outer space. We are only responsible for our planet and our country. So needless to say, when I say our planet, I'm not saying that the United States is responsible for the planet, although a lot of people would like that because then they would give themselves permission to illegally come into our country, which is exactly what is happening here. And I just want to make a note here, like, what if everybody that wanted to come to the United States left their country and just came here? Let's say we had an entire population of India leave their country because it sucks, because they have the caste system. Let's say they came over here. Our country cannot sustain the population of India or China. We are the United States, and I personally think we need to close our borders because we have so many people coming here illegally that it is interfering with our legal process of immigration. And, at this point, we don't have the healthcare system to handle all these people coming here. And I don't say that as a proponent to encourage socialized medicine because I do not believe in socialized medicine. Because if we have universal health care, our healthcare system would completely fail. And it's already going in that direction because we have so many people that are coming into this country illegally. They are not paying their fair share. They're not paying taxes, but yet they go to the emergency room, utilize our healthcare services, and they pitch in nothing. These people are greedy. These people are horrible. They're trespassing. I understand that people get sick and need help, but they need to go back to their country and do good there, as opposed to coming here, coming to the United States illegally, and they are stealing and thieving our health care. I can't tell you how many times I've been to the ER, and there have been people there that I'm not sure that they're from the United States, and I'm not even sure if they are here legally, but yet they are getting health care that belongs to Americans. Like, we are not responsible for healing and treating, the planet. We are not responsible for the planet. We are only responsible for Americans. So needless to say, our healthcare system, it's being bogged down by people that don't pay into it at all. That is a thief. Please recognize that. That's not being cold and heartless. Not at all. It's being smart. Like, to say that, you recognize this, that, how does it help our military, women that leave domestic violence situations? How does it help our elderly? How does it help anyone to have a bunch of illegals here participating in a healthcare system that they don't support at all? They pitch in nothing. Absolutely nothing. These people are taking up space. They're stealing our healthcare. They're stealing our jobs. And here's another thing. One of the biggest reasons why there is inequality within labor in the United States is because we have so many illegals coming here that are willing to take the job of an American but do it at the fraction of a price. And I'm not excusing employers that hire these people. I think these employers should be fined thousands, if not millions of dollars for hiring illegals because they are contributing to poverty here in the United States. But here's the thing. A thief is a thief. These people that come here, they don't love America. They love themselves. They are greedy, selfish, evil people that come here. They do not respect our laws. They just steal. They are thieves. And here's the thing. Our military does nothing to stop this. Absolutely nothing. It's their department literally says the Department of Defense. Like, they are supposed to defend the country, our country, from people that come here illegally and stop illegal immigration. Here's another thing that people don't realize. And I find this kind of comical because people are all upset about COVID-19 and, there's some people that are like, oh, you should get vaccinated. It should be a requirement. And if you don't get vaccinated, then you're a horrible human being. Okay. Well, if you really think that people that do not get vaccinated for COVID-19 are evil and horrible, then what do you think about all these illegal people that are coming into the United States and bringing in diseases that we don't normally treat here? I'm talking about tropical diseases and a whole bunch of other things that we do not typically have outbreaks of certain types of diseases that are rampant in other countries. So if people that, I'm just going along with this thinking because I don't think that people, if someone refuses a vaccine, I don't necessarily think they're evil. I think they're stupid and they're morons. Unless, of course, they, for health reasons, they cannot receive a vaccine. I would think that if you want to, try and deter disease as much as possible and there is a vaccine, then you should be vaccinated. I mean, I just think it's important. So, anyway, so if you think that people that do not get the COVID-19 vaccine are horrible, then so is everybody else that immigrates to this country illegally. Because hardly any of those people are vaccinated for anything. Like, this is why we were having outbreaks of measles, mumps, and rubella. These are childhood diseases that were once thought to be eradicated, like polio, but here's the thing. I've talked about this in times past. The word eradicate is a lie. It's not really eradicate. It just means that it's not happening as much in your country because people are inoculated. They have received a vaccine. But just because, you don't have an occurrence of measles, mumps, rubella, or COVID-19 or the flu, that doesn't mean that it still does not exist in nature because it is a bacterium or a virus, whatever the case may be. It just means that it cannot find a host or as many people to infect because people have built up immunity because they have been vaccinated. So here's the thing. We have all these thousands of illegal immigrants, aka thieves, horrible people coming in here, not earning their keep, and they're violating our laws at a state and federal level and international law. Think about this, people. They are violating numerous laws. Do not have pity for these people. Pity doesn't pay bills, and pity doesn't keep you safe. It doesn't keep your family safe, okay? So don't let people pull at your heartstrings, and don't listen to their stupid violin that they play, okay? Everybody has a violin. Not everybody plays it at the same level or same volume. So here's the thing. If you're concerned about COVID-19, then I think, okay, why aren't more people concerned about the diseases that are coming across our border? Because these people are not vaccinated for hardly anything. And they are greatly infecting people, Americans at the border, whether it is our I think they're the U.S. Marshal or the Border Patrol. Like, there's so much that our federal employees that work at the border, they get exposed to so many harmful diseases because of these people that are illegally immigrating into the United States. Is that fair to do that to our workers that are here legally? Is that fair to do that to citizens that actually live here and actually obey the laws? No. Like, I just find it so odd that some people just think that we should have an open door policy, on our borders. You are a moron. You are absolute moron and an idiot if you think that that's how this this country should operate. Because that is not a safe country. If you just allow anyone and everyone to come in and there's no rules, like, it's basically guerrilla warfare. And I feel so sorry for all these people that live in these towns and cities, next to our border, because they are having to deal with so much crime, so many illegal people coming into the country, and they are just swarming stuff. It's ridiculous. And here's another thing. Okay, people don't realize this, but there is a large group of people that are illegal immigrants that are also homeless. Well, then that means that the cost of feeding the homeless and providing for them is going to go up substantially, because we have welfare programs that actually help the homeless, but we are not responsible for illegal homeless people. We need to put them on airplanes or ships and send them back to their country. We are not responsible for their misery. We are not responsible, for their health care, their welfare. They need to obey the laws of the land. Here's the thing, Mexico doesn't care if these people come into our country illegally because Mexico doesn't want them. Doesn't that speak volumes that even Mexico doesn't want these people? And here's another thing. Let me put it this way. Let's say, for example, things aren't going right in our country here in the United States. And let's say, we're just going to leave and illegally immigrate to, some other country. Let's say we'll just go to Europe. Did you know that Europe actually has very strict immigration laws? Very strict. And Russia and Iran are even worse in terms of the strictness. So here's the thing, I just find it odd that whenever times get tough in someone else's country, they don't care to stay and do what's right and take their country back and make it better. They're like, I'm out of here. I'm just going to illegally immigrate to the United States because I'm a dreamer. Well, let me say this to all you dreamers out there. Dream on. You're a thief, you're a punk, you're a thug for coming here. I don't care if you're a man, woman, or child. This is ridiculous. We have laws for a reason. It is to protect our country, not your country, our country. And if you really want to do what's right, be legal, do things that are legal and moral, why don't you stay in your homeland, make a difference, stand up for what's right, and have your own country that's great and wonderful? Instead of immigrating here, like if the entire planet immigrates to the United States, it's horrible. Like that is basically what is happening. There's so many people that want to come here to the United States. They don't care to do what's right and make a difference in their country. That's stupid. That's why these people are greedy thieves. Like these people do not have character. They do not have integrity. I don't even know what their morals and values are because it's obviously subpar if they're breaking the law. Like they're breaking international law, federal law, and state laws. Like think about this, people. This is why illegal immigration is such a problem. Because it creates inflation within our country. So now we have way more people that are trying to get access to the same goods, but not everybody's paying into the system. That's called a thief. That's called stealing. Like, wake up, America, and realize you're being robbed. Like, you're being tooken. That's what we say, from Leave It to Beaver. Oh, he got tooken. Basically, people are pulling the wool over your eyes and they're saying, oh, feel sorry for me. I had it really bad in Venezuela. I had it really bad in Cuba. I don't care. Go back to your country and fix it. Stop electing bad people to power. Like, if a dictator came to power and took over the country, take it back. They're just a person. Take them out. Like, I don't understand why these people don't stand up for what's right and take their country back. Take their property back. Help their families, help their country, help their communities. No, these are rats abandoning a sinking ship. You know what? Instead of abandoning your sinking ship, why don't you repair your ship? Why don't you become a true democracy? Why not become a wonderful country like the United States? Have your own democracy, and have your own democracy and your own capitalism. Just go for it. But see, here's the thing. These people don't care to do what's right. They don't care. Should we be letting these people in? No! Goodness no. This is a problem. Take a look at what is happening at the border. Our president does nothing. Our vice president does nothing. Our military is not helping with this. This is what happens when you get bad leaders in power. And here's the number one thing that we should do. We need to pray for these people. We need to pray for our president. We need to pray for the vice president. And we need to pray for our military. Because they don't have a clue what they're doing. What's interesting is that our leaders don't know what they're doing, but we know what to do. The American people know. We're like, okay, secure the border. Hello, common sense. Like when you own a home, you should always lock your doors at night. You don't just keep them unlocked or just open and then wonder why someone came in and robbed you. This is how dumb the current administration is. And yet this department, the Department of Defense, spends billions, if not trillions of dollars a year, per year, people, because, their budget of being, $721.5 billion, that's just in the spending that we know about. So this is why this agency does not like audits. They should totally be audited every year, twice a year, internal and external audit. See, this is why these people think they're untouchable. Because they get away with whatever they want. But yet, can the average American act like that? No. I think we can all agree, no. We cannot act like the Department of Defense. None of us can act like a federal agency and just get away with whatever we want, however we want. And spend someone else's money in the billions of dollars. What's interesting is that our federal government shames and blames our banking system, Wall Street, and anyone that has to deal with money. But yet look at what they do. If that's not calling the kettle black, I don't know what is. Maybe they should really read the Bible. Have some morals, have some values, do what's right. My goodness. So another agency that is part of this that wastes a lot of money, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which is a joke. The Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, also a joke. The Space Development Agency, again, I could care less about space unless, you're going to have really nice people come visit here that can maybe help us cure a whole lot of diseases. And then you have the Pentagon Force Protection Agency. I have no idea what that is. Sounds like a joke. All of which are subordinate to the Secretary of Defense. So you have all these agencies that are subordinate to the Secretary of Defense. And yet a lot of the people that are in charge of these agencies are appointed. So my point is this: if you have someone that is a moron and an idiot in charge of your military, what kind of people do you think they're going to employ? Not very good, right? So it says, additionally, the Defense Contract Management Agency is responsible for administering contracts for the DoD. Okay, so this is a big issue here because there was a Senate hearing committee that Senator Elizabeth Warren was on. Now, mind you, she's a little bit of a nut, but she was absolutely right about this. She was talking about how there's a big issue with government contracts, like military contracts, and these contractors that make millions of dollars, they just go from working in the contract world, being employed by the military, to then being appointed to the very agency that didn't like them. So then they just basically appoint whoever they want, and they still make millions of dollars. So there's basically a lack of accountability, and it actually hinders our military, and they are not actually helping our military or their families. They're just feeding at the trough, these military contracts and these military contractors. So big eye-opening experience with that Senate hearing. I learned a lot. I was kind of shocked. But anyway, so then we have the military. It says military operations are managed by 11 regional or functional unified combatant commands, which we will discuss later. It says the Department of Defense also operates several joint services schools, including the Eisenhower School and the National War College. So interesting there that they have something called the National War College, but yet we have these liberal progressives that they don't even know how to fight on the playground because they complain about bullies. It's like, look, just sock the bully in the face. Like, defend yourself, people. Grow up. Take some Tai Chi or some karate. Grow up here a little bit, So a little bit of history. It says, faced with rising tensions between the 13 colonies and the British government, one of the first actions taken by the First Continental Congress in September 1774 was to recommend that the colonies begin defensive military preparations. In mid-June 1775, after the outbreak of the Revolutionary War, the Second Continental Congress, recognizing the necessity of having a national army that could move about and fight beyond the boundaries of any particular colony, organized the Continental Army on June 14, 1775. Later that year, Congress would charter the Continental Navy on October 13th and the Continental Marines on November 10th. So good thing that they started these things, right? So a little bit about the War Department and the Navy Department. It says that on September 29th, 1789, Congress created the War Department. The War Department handled naval affairs until Congress created the Navy Department in 1798. The secretaries of each department reported directly to the president as cabinet level advisors until 1949, when all military departments became subordinate to the Secretary of Defense. Now, a little bit about the national military establishment. It says after the end of World War II, President Harry Truman proposed the creation of a unified Department of National Defense. This is good. In a special message to Congress on December 19, 1945, the president cited both wasteful military spending and interdepartmental conflicts. That's very typical of these federal agencies because they typically have pissing contests. Not good. It says deliberations in Congress went on for months, focusing heavily on the role of the military in society and the threat of granting too much military power to the executive. On July 26, 1947, Truman signed the National Security Act of 1947, which set up a unified military command known as the National Military Establishment, as well as creating the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Council, National Security Resources Board, the United States Air Force, formerly known as the Army Air Forces, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The act placed the national military establishment under the control of a single Secretary of Defense. That's good because you're basically it's called streamlining, but you're basically making sure that there's no duplication. So you're trying to unify things, but make sure that there's no duplication. It says the national military establishment was renamed the Department of Defense on August 10th, 1949, it absorbed the 3 cabinet-level military departments in an amendment to the original 1947 law. A little bit about financial discrepancies moving on. It says here, and I don't know how much of this is true, but it says, a day before the September 11 attacks in 2001, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld announced that the department was unable to account for about $2.3 trillion, that's trillion with a T, $2.3 trillion worth of transactions. Reuters reported in 2013 that the Pentagon was the only federal agency that had not released annual audits as required by a 1992 law. And then it says, according to Reuters, the Pentagon annually reports to Congress that its books are in such disarray that an audit is impossible. Bull. An audit is always possible. They just don't want people to know what they're doing with our money, because that's taxpayer money that they are using for waste and fraud and who knows what else. It says here, in June 2016, the Office of the Inspector General released a report stating that the Army made $6.5 trillion in wrongful adjustments to its accounting entries in 2015. I laugh because that's a whole lot of money going down the drain, and it's our military. Like, this is ridiculous. I mean, this is why some people don't want an audit. It's because they don't want people to know what they're doing and what they are turning a blind eye to. So this is why it's very important, especially for our government agencies, our federal agencies, to have internal and external audits. Otherwise, it's a free-for-all in terms of spending money like that. So the fact that they don't want to have audits, it's very communist and fascist of them to do that because they love spending other people's money. So it says here, the Department of Defense is composed of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Joint Staff, Office of the Inspector General, the Combatant Commands, the military departments, which includes Department of the Army, Navy, and let's see here, Departments of the Air Force, the Defense Agencies, and Department of Defense Field Activities. I have no idea what that means. And the National Guard Bureau, and such other offices, agencies, activities, organizations, and commands established or designated by law, or by the President, or by the Secretary of Defense. Now, in terms of agencies that are listed under the umbrella of the the Department of Defense, we have here the Armed Forces Radiobiology Research Institute, the Department of Defense Education Activity. Who knows what that means? It sounds like a joke. Then you have the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. That sounds like a joke to me. Then you have the Defense Commissary Agency, whatever that means. Then you have the Defense Contract Audit Agency. They don't even audit themselves. This is such a joke, folks. Then we have the Defense Contract Management Agency. That's that corrupt one there. Then you have the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. That's a joke. They don't even know how to account for the monies that they're spending from us. Wow. They're just a spoiled, rotten little kid throwing a hissy fit on aisle 7, and Congress and the Senate stupidly give them all the money that they want. Wow. Cut the apron strings, Congress and Senate. So then they have the Defense Information Systems Agency. They have the Defense Legal Services Agency. What do? Just have lawyers to always protect themselves. And then you have the Defense Logistics Agency. Then you have the Defense POW/MIA Accounting Agency. Then you have the Defense Security Corporation Agency. Then you have the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. Then you have the Defense Technical Information Center, whatever that means. Then you have the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Again, that's a joke. Then you have the Space Development Agency. Again, dumb. And then, let's see here, under the National Intelligence Agencies within the Department of Defense, you have the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and we have discussed that one. Then we have the National Reconnaissance Office. So some of this, it repeats a little bit, but it's because these agencies overlap a little bit. Now, in terms of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, so these are bureaucrats, basically, that are appointed to these positions, and they're not always that bright. Let's see here. It says the Joint Chiefs of Staff is a body of senior uniformed leaders in the Department of Defense who advise the Secretary of Defense, the Homeland Security Council, the National Security Council, and the President on military matters. Obviously, they don't always do a very good job, unfortunately. They definitely get our prayers. It says the Commission of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is defined by statute and consists of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, senior enlisted advisor to the chairman, the military service chiefs from the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and Space Force, in addition to the Chief of National Guard Bureau, all appointed by the President following Senate confirmation. Obviously, our Senate needs some help if they're appointing some not-so-good people. Each of the individual military service chiefs outside their Joint Chiefs of Staff obligations works directly for the Secretary of the Military Department concerned, and specifically like the Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Navy, and Secretary of the Air Force, those plump people that are not very much in shape. Then we have the military departments and their services. So we have the Department of the Army, within which is the United States Army. Then you have the Department of the Navy, which includes the Navy and the United States Marine Corps. Then you have the United States Department, you have the Air Force, which also includes the Space Force. So I wonder if the Space Force people are just as out of shape as the United States Air Force people. You need to be in shape, people. It kind of reminds me of these people that are cops, usually men that are fat slobs and they just eat donuts. It's like really, the odds of them running after a bad guy are really low. So then it says the military departments are each headed by their own secretary. So for example, Secretary of the Army, Secretary of the Military, and Secretary of the Air Force, aka the plump people, appointed by the President with the advice and consent of the Senate. They have the legal authority under Title 10 of the United States Code to conduct all the affairs of their respective departments within which the military services are organized. The secretaries of the military departments are by law subordinate to the subordinate to the Secretary of Defense and to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. It says the secretaries of military departments, in turn, normally exercise authority over their forces by delegation through their respective service chiefs, basically Chief of Staff of the Army, Commander or Commandant of the Marine Corps, Chief of Naval Operations, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and Chief of Space Operations over forces not assigned to a combatant command. So basically, it's who you know. So basically, you have bureaucrats that are appointing other bureaucrats. So that's why we have some problems in our military. It says secretaries of military departments and service chiefs do not possess operational command authority over U.S. troops. This power was stripped from them in the Defense Reorganization Act of 1958. Instead, military departments are tasked solely with the training, provision of equipment, and administration of troops. So next we're going to talk a little bit about the military departments of the Department of Defense, but let me get a drink of water, so hold on just one moment. It's kind of a long podcast, but it's really good. I think it's good. Very informative. I did know a little bit about this one, but I did not know all the intricacies and how these things overlap, and I did not know that their budget was that bad, that it was that large. It's just kind of shocking to me. So we have these different departments here. It is the Department of the Army, Department of the Navy, Department of the Air Force, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Navy, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Space Force. So then you also have the Unified Combatant Command. So these are just people that they kind of overlap with each other. And so it talks a little bit about it. It says during military operations, the chain of command runs from the President to the Secretary of Defense to the combatant commanders of the combatant commands. As of 2019, the United States has 11 combatant commands organized either on a geographical basis, also known as area of responsibility, or on a global functional basis. And these are divided out. So you have the U.S. Northern Command, the U.S. Southern Command, the U.S. Central Command, U.S. European Command, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, U.S. Africa Command, U.S. Strategic Command, U.S. Special Operations Command, U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Cyber Command, and U.S. Space Command. Interesting stuff there. So I'm not going to go into great detail about the budget because it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's just wasteful spending, and in this article, they try and, say why stuff was spent a certain way. It's just waste and fraud is all it is. And so, if they are declining to do audits, that's a big red flag. Our government and every agency within our government needs to have an internal and an external audit Otherwise, it's just a free-for-all for spending someone else's money, which in this case is our money, the tax dollars, the taxpayers' money. And, just think about how much money they're wasting that could be going towards, other things within our country, helping our communities, helping our citizens. And notice I said citizens, not illegals, because illegal people are not citizens. So we shouldn't be helping them. This article talks a little bit about how much energy they use and the carbon footprint of the military. I mean, big whoop. I mean, of course, if you have an overinflated military, of course they're going to have a large carbon footprint because they are defending the United States and they use a lot of jets, a lot of vehicles and things of that nature. So it's kind of like, well, maybe they would have less of a carbon footprint if they were not, spending our money on things that they don't actually need. Because one of the things that was talked about in their financial discrepancies was they have trillions of dollars of wasteful spending on things that they don't actually need. And the reason why they have wasteful spending besides waste and fraud is because they don't even know what they have stockpiled. And so they buy all this stuff that they don't actually need, and then they have all this stuff that's stored that's obsolete that they never used. So this is why it's very important to do audits. Doing an audit is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. Like I've worked as a staff accountant for, 14 years now. And I've also done auditing work. It's one of those things that the word audit, it can scare some people, but it should not scare you. It's one of those things that it creates accountability. And it just means that you want to know what's going on. And that is very much so whenever you're dealing with our tax dollars. Basically monies that are taken out of our paychecks and given to our federal government and or our state government, depending on whether or not you have a state income tax. And just FYI, just because, states like Texas and I think Florida, I don't think they have a state income tax. I could be wrong because I don't know much about Florida, but, just because a state doesn't have state income tax, that doesn't mean that it's always cheaper to live there because they always make up that cost with real estate tax. Because there's so many houses in Florida and Texas that are super expensive because of the real estate tax, property tax. And, one thing that people may not realize is that people that live in apartments, they are very much paying the bulk of that real estate tax because they don't own a home. And so a lot of these people that are renting, whether it's a house or an apartment, but specifically people that live in apartments, they're totally getting leased and fleeced because of this real estate tax that's being passed on to them from their landlords. So, here's the thing, you may not be able to stand your landlord for whatever reason, but just know that your landlord is having to pay a lot in tax, in property tax, and they have to make up that money somewhere. So if you're for high taxes, you're a moron and an idiot because you're basically punishing people for being alive. You're basically punishing people for needing a home, purchasing a home, renting a home. You're basically punishing people for filling up their tank of gas to get to and from work. And it's just really taxes need to be low all across the board. I don't think taxes should be higher than 10%. That's my personal opinion. Because I think anything over 10% is just waste and fraud and overspending. And I think there needs to be accountability for the taxes that our government collects. Let me get a drink of water. Hold on just one moment. Okay, so moving on here, it says, a 2013 Reuters investigation concluded that Defense Finance and Accounting Service, which is a joke of a department, the Department of Defense's primary financial management arm, implements monthly unsubstantiated change actions, meaning illegal, inaccurate transactions that forcibly make DoD's books match the Treasury's books. That's really scary, folks, because if you or I were to do that, that would be considered IRS fraud, and we would be put in jail. But yet these people don't go to jail for the fraud that they commit. It says here, from Reuters, it says fudging the accounts with false entries is standard operating procedure. Reuters has found that the Pentagon is largely incapable of keeping track of its vast stores of weapons, ammunition, and other supplies. Thus, it continues to spend money on new supplies it doesn't need and on storing others long out of date. It has amassed a backlog of more than $500 billion. How much of that money paid for actual goods and services delivered isn't known. That's really sad, folks. We can do better as a country. It says in 2015, a Pentagon consulting firm performed an audit on the Department of Defense's budget. It found that there was $125 billion in wasteful spending that could be saved over the next 5 years without layoffs or reduction in military personnel. In 2016, the Washington Post uncovered that rather than taking the advice of the auditing firm, senior defense officials, bureaucrats basically, suppressed and hid the report from the public to avoid political scrutiny. Why am I not surprised? They've been doing it for years. Now, in terms of legislation, in regards to the defense, it says that the organization, the organization and the functions of the Department of Defense are in Title 10 of the United States Code. And they have other significant legislation related to the Department of Defense, and some of this includes, it says the National Security Act of 1947, the Department of Defense Reorganization Act of 1958, the Department of Defense Appropriations Act of 1963, the Military Construction Authorization Act of 1963, the Supplemental Defense Appropriations Act of 1967, the Department of Defense Authorization Act of 1984, the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986, let's see here, and the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996. So we will go through those individually because I think it's very interesting to see what exactly these things mean, what they mean, where they come from, how are they implemented, and how do they impact us today. Because, I am all for rules, laws, regulations, and things of that nature, especially in regards to legislation. But here's the thing. Sometimes what was passed and put into effect years ago is not relevant or accurate to what we do today. So I say that in terms of caution because, sometimes there are things that are foolproof and they may have been passed, back in the 30s or 40s, and they may still be a very good type of legislation that is being implemented today, but others may not because, as we know, technology changes, your country grows, sometimes legally or illegally, unfortunately. And this is why we need to be careful about who we elect into office, because it is the people that are elected into office that appoint people to these positions of power, and then they can very much affect our rules, laws, regulations, and our legislation, which is why it very much matters, who we have for Congress and Senate and things of that nature, because sometimes these people have a big impact on our everyday living. Whereas sometimes they affect things on an international level. And sometimes they just flat out don't do their job. Like I think the fact that we have such an immigration problem right now is not only the fault of the American people, it is our fault. We have been very stupid about this. But it is also the fault of our Congress, our Senate, and our President. And not just the current President. I think President Trump tried really hard to stop illegal immigration, and he wanted to build a wall, but so many people fought him. Like Americans that were elected to office fought him on this. It's like, how can you be an American citizen, be elected to public office, and not be for the defense and security of this country? I just don't get it. It makes no sense. But here's the thing. It's not just Democrats that make mistakes. Republicans can make mistakes as well. For example, I've said this in times past, and I'll close with this. One of the things I did not like that President George Bush did after 9/11, he created this knee-jerk reaction from the federal government and created the TSA. And basically, it was a punishment on Americans whenever we travel, whether nationally or internationally. And it's like, okay, not a single American implemented the attacks of 9/11. Not a single American did that. So why are we continuing to punish American travelers? It just makes no sense to me. And here's another thing. Why are we not creating a good, safe border, especially our southern border? Because, think about it, we're not having problems with Canadians. I mean, yeah, a lot of them are socialists and stupid, don't understand how economies work, and they don't understand how capitalism works, but yet they love money. But here's the thing. Canada doesn't understand that borders matter. Canada, I think Canada takes it for granted that Americans are not trespassing into Canada by the thousands. Because what people don't know or may not realize is that Canada has a very strict immigration policy. Like, you can't just go there and, just immigrate illegally. Canada is super strict. Super, super strict. Like, for the most part, in order to get citizenship there, you have to have a college degree, you have to have a job lined up, and you have to prove that you are valuable as a worker. If that's not communist, I don't know what is. Like, and here we have Trudeau, the stupid Prime Minister of Canada, whom stupid Canadians keep voting for him. They keep electing him. So, not all of Canada is stupid, but when you keep electing a playboy to be your leader, who's a moron and an idiot, and doesn't value your life or safety, I'm just like, wow, like, these people don't have a clue how to run a country. And then here they are, barking orders at the United States, lecturing us about immigration. And it's like, okay, you have a way more stricter immigration policy than the United States. Like Canada, they don't take the uneducated. They don't take migrant workers. They don't. They don't take in the homeless. They don't take in foreigners like we do. They don't take in uneducated people. They only take in so-called the best and the brightest, like people that have been to college, have a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD. Like, see, here's the hypocrisy with this. Like, here's Canada making it seem like they have all the answers to the planet, and they're lecturing the United States about how to be a country when they don't even value people. They really don't. I mean, it's a socialist country with universal health care, and their citizens don't even have access to the very medicines that they need. So here's the thing. Canada, they greatly discriminate against people that want to immigrate there, but yet they claim that we practice discrimination and that we're racist. Canada and Canadians are unbelievably racist. And this may offend some of my Canadian listeners, but, if you're in Canada and you know what I'm talking about, then FYI, you know what I'm talking about. It's just ridiculous. It's like, don't lecture the United States about immigrants and race when you yourselves practice so many horrible governmental, I would say, controlled policies that do not protect your own people, overtax them, and then they basically don't want uneducated people coming there and taking their jobs. That's why Canada is not heavily populated. Like, for example, if you look at the land mass of Canada as a continent or whatever, they are huge. But they are not heavily populated like the United States. One of the reasons why is because they don't just take in anybody. They kick people out like nobody's business, but yet they make it seem like they have these open arms. People, they do not have open arms. They do not have open arms. It is ridiculous how strict they are. I mean, it's just like, it just makes me roll my eyes. And I'll give an example of something that I did not know about. So I can't remember how I came across this, but I came across an article about Mary Pickford. I guess she was a Canadian actress. She really wasn't American. She's a joke and a fraud. But she was a very successful Canadian actress that worked here in the United States, made millions of dollars, and she was an actress during the talkie time, talkies or whatever. I take that back. Silent film. She actually did not transition over very well to talkie films, or talkies is what they're called. So basically, she was a very popular child actress, teeny bopper actress, and maybe in her 20s actress, so to speak, whenever her films were silent. But then when people actually heard her voice, they didn't like her. So, which is funny. So she's not really an actress. She was just a moving face. I mean, anybody could have been successful if there was no sound. So that's basically who she was. So anyway, so she was very popular here in the United States, and she was known as being America's girlfriend or the girl next door or America's sweetheart or some BS line like that. Folks, she was not even American. She was Canadian. And here's the thing. She married some really rich guys here in the United States, had affairs, slept around. She's a skank. I mean, she wasn't a whore, but I mean, she definitely laid on her back, so to speak. And so then, I don't think she actually had any kids. I think she had abortions, and then she, I guess, got sterilized by accident or something with an abortion. And then, she actually adopted some kids, and she wasn't very nice to them. They actually couldn't stand her, And I'm like, I don't blame them because she made it all about her. Well, get this. Towards the end of her life, she actually contacted, I guess, the immigration services of Canada and wanted to make sure that she still had Canadian citizenship. even though she's considered America's sweetheart, which is a bull line, it's a BS line. And so, she just basically used the United States and she used Hollywood to make money, but she was Canadian. So, she is not pro-America, she was pro-Canadian. And what's interesting is that when she was here in the United States, working and whatnot, she made sure to go to the Canadian embassy every year, or however often you're supposed to go, and she wanted to make sure she still had Canadian citizenship. Even though she was here in the United States making a whole lot of money that she could not make back in Canada. If that's not a thief, I don't know what is. So get this. So she helped to create, I guess, a couple of different movie star labor unions, and then she actually has a Hollywood star or whatever on the Walk of Fame or whatever, not the Walk of Shame, but the Walk of Fame. And so, she has a star on that, whatever, I think it's near Grauman's Chinese Theater. I've never seen it. I could care less. But, because to me, she's not a star. Not a star at all. She immigrated here, didn't really care to be an American, but yet made millions of dollars. Like, if you look up how much money she made, it was ridiculous. And then she still continued to keep her Canadian citizenship. I mean, it's, I seriously think we need to do away with dual citizenship, because I think they need to make a decision. Are you American or are you something else? If you're something else, that's fine. But, you can't be coming here making millions of dollars when that money can be going towards someone that's actually an American citizen and actually loves and cares about the United States. I mean, it was just ridiculous the amount of money she made, and she didn't even say anything on screen. She was a silent movie star, and here she made millions of dollars doing nothing. And what's funny is that, when she actually grew up and, was an adult, like in her 30s or something, and people actually heard her voice, they didn't want her. They didn't want her as an actress. Because, they just got so used to her having these curls and being young and all this stuff. And it's like, wow. So now you know what it's like to age in the United States, where it's like, even back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, it's like if a woman was over the age of 22 or 25, she was considered an old hag. So I guess even Canadian women can be old hags and, be disappointed in life. Anyway, my point is this, is that, Canada, they are not this good, wonderful country, that's just open arms to everybody and is nice to everybody. I mean, all you have to do is listen to any Canadian comedian and hear how they trash the United States. But yet here's the thing, those comedians would not be making a lot of money if they only stayed in Canada. Here's the thing, they come to the United States and diss us, talk trash about our country, yet we make way more money in terms of GDP, we have way more rights, we have a better healthcare system, we have better property, and we don't have a nut like Trudeau in charge of our country. Like, can you imagine if Trudeau was in charge of the United States? I mean, he would totally mess it up. I think he would actually be worse than Biden. I really do. Because I've seen some, I guess Canada has a parliament, and I've seen a couple of videos of where he's talking, to the conservatives, and he's responding to their questions and things like that, because the conservatives are getting really sick of him. I don't blame them, but see, here's the thing, these conservatives that are in office, that are representing the people that vote for them, here's the thing, there are morons that vote for Trudeau. You need to be talking to the citizens of your country. Because you're not going to change the mind of your minister. You're just not. Because, he is a career politician, and so was his father. The apple does not fall far from the tree. So I think that the conservatives in Canada, instead of, going after Trudeau verbally, which I think they should call him out and stuff, you need to call out the stupid citizens you have in your country that keep voting him in. Because it's not by accident or by fraud that he is their leader. There are people that actually agree with this idiot. Like, they actually agree with what he's doing and how he's running their country. And yet they have the nerve to complain about inflation in their country. And then they have the nerve to complain about the cost of utilities and the cost of gas and the cost of fuel or whatever. It's like, okay, your stupid leader that you elected is causing a lot of these problems. because he is all for a green tax. So, I mean, it's like, you need to talk to your citizens about this. Make them aware of what he's doing. I mean, for sure, call him out on stuff, but I mean, it's just, my point is this. Canadians are not these sweet, nice little people. They use the United States for money, and this has gone back for years. Mary Pickford is an awesome example of this. Awesome example. So is Leslie Nelson. I think that was his name. He was an actor from Canada. And, for the longest time I thought he was American. No, he's Canadian. He's Canadian. It's like, wow. So here we have, oh my goodness, we need to look at how many Canadian actors and actresses come here to the United States and make so much money, but yet they still don't respect the United States. It's like, okay, that would be like me going to Canada, being a movie star there, making millions of dollars off of your people, and then dissing the very people that helped me to have an income, a future, and a career. That's how insulting that is. I mean, it's just unbelievable what some of these people do. And I was just like, oh my gosh, people, wake up. Wake up. And what's interesting is that our Department of Defense sometimes very much acts like Canada, in that they don't like being told what to do. They don't like being held accountable for anything, but they love to spend other people's money. This is why I am not a fan of labor unions or trade unions having international status or whatever, and having any kind of, I would say, union relationship with the Canadian Union, because they do not honor or respect the United States. They use us for money. It's very similar to all these illegal immigrants that come here. They're just users. They're thieves. I don't understand why people don't wake up to this. I just don't get it. Like, I just think, wow. Have people not read the Constitution of the United States? Probably not. Have they not read the Bible? Probably not. Have they not read the Constitution of their individual state? Probably not. All those things I just listed are there to protect you. So if you don't even care to know what's there to protect you, then who do you have to blame but yourself when something bad goes down? Or whenever there's waste, fraud, overspending, lack of accountability, think about it, folks. We, the people of the United States, we are in charge of this country, and who we elect and who we appoint is a reflection of what we think, say, and do. So guess what? If Biden makes the United States look bad, that's our stupid fault. I didn't vote for him, but here's the thing. He's our leader. He is our representative for the United States. Just like Trudeau, that moron, is their leader, and he represents Canadians. So it's kind of like, you can blame the leader all day and all night. You need to look to the citizens, the idiots and the morons that voted for these people, and that are for their policies and procedures. Let me put it this way. If Trudeau were to talk to us about the budget of the Department of Defense, I guarantee you he would be all for it. And he would be like, oh, well, why don't you spend more? It's the government. The government has the answer to everything. See, here's the thing. If Trudeau thinks something is great, you know it's a problem and you know it's stupid. So do the opposite of what he says to do. Every single time, hands down, do the opposite of what Trudeau says, because, wow, he's a, what he's like? I've talked about this before. He's like the kid in class. He's basically the one-upper. Like someone, let's say, for example, I remember this in college. I hated this. Like in my English lit classes, we had graded discussions, and we stupidly had a merged class where we had the undergraduates with the graduate students. We hate it because the graduate students would always try and one-up us in the grade discussion, so then our grades would suffer, theirs would not, and they hated us. And it was so awful. Well, that's basically what Trudeau is. He's a stupid grad student that thinks because he has more education, supposedly more education, that what he says is more important than what the undergrads have to say, and he doesn't care that it's affecting our grade. because he's the one-upper. It's kind of like, whenever you're telling your story to like a friend or something, not a best friend, but just like a regular friend. And, you tell them about, what happened with your week. And let's say it didn't go very well. And they're like, oh, you think you've got it bad? Here's what happened to me. I had this. This is what happened to me. You don't know anything about this. My week was worse. That's the one-upper. That's what Trudeau is. Like, do you really want that for a leader, Canada? And let me say this to the United States. Do you really want that for a leader in the United States? I mean, I think Kamala Harris is kind of a one-upper, but she's kind of a weak-minded one-upper because she's an attorney and she's not very lawful. She's not very ethical. I mean, all you have to do is look at some of the cases she tried as a prosecutor in California and how many people basically she unlawfully helped to put in prison and did not do the right thing. And so, this is why you have to be careful who you elect. And let me say this. I will extend an olive branch to the Democratic Party. Here's the thing. I know there's some people that really like Biden, but they don't like Kamala Harris. And so because they liked Biden, they went ahead and voted for him. Well, see, here's the thing. If you don't like the vice president, you probably shouldn't vote for that president because they go together. See, here's the thing. If Biden doesn't run again, then it's not a big surprise that Kamala Harris would want to run for presidency. And see, here's the thing. If you don't like her, but you like Joe Biden, and let's say Kamala Harris is going to run for president, and people are going to be like, oh, well, she should be president because she is vice president. See, here's the thing. You open the floodgate to this stupid thinking that if someone has run for vice president and actually was vice president, that they should automatically be president. That's not always true. The vice president is not always as good as the president. But see, here's the thing. When you elect a president, at least here in the United States, you're electing two people technically. You're electing the president and the vice president, so you need to be careful who you elect as president because you're also getting a vice president, and that vice president might soon become your president if they choose to run for office. See, here's the thing. You want to make sure that you're not enabling bad leaders to be your leader. You want to make sure that you don't promote and basically you don't, how do I describe this? Well, basically, you don't promote the wrong people. And I think Kamala Harris would be a horrible leader. She can't hardly answer any questions. She pulls the whole, just wandering around in circles with the question, just like President Obama. And the reason why they do that is because they're lawyers and they're incompetent people. Not all lawyers are incompetent, but those two very much are. And what's interesting is that both of them have served or are serving in a position of leadership. See, I'm not a fan of electing lawyers to public office. I'm like, is that the best we can get? Is that the best we can get? Because you have to remember that lawyers, their curriculum and their studies, they're taught how to legally lie. Is that who you want to be your leader? Is that who you want in charge of any federal agency? Is that who you want in charge of any of your taxpayer money? I would venture to say no. Well, here's the thing. If you don't want people that have a lack of ethics and morals, if you don't want them to be in charge of certain things, then you don't elect them to that office. And I think the Democratic Party really failed when they had Kamala Harris be Joe Biden's VP. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden, but I think they could have picked a way better VP. Like, there were so many other better candidates on that stage, way better than Kamala Harris. So much better. I mean, it was just really disappointing me. Like, I don't think the Biden-Harris ticket represents anything good about the Democratic Party. And I think, for me personally, that saddens me because I like to see, even if I don't agree with someone and I'm not going to elect them, I at least like to see the best that they can provide for their party. And I personally think that Biden and Harris were not the best. Excuse me, have hiccups a little bit. I think they totally could have done better. And I think the Biden-Harris ticket, they have really let down the Democratic Party. And even worse, they've let down the American people. And see, here's the thing, that's our fault. Let me say it again, that's our fault. As Americans, it is our fault that we have allowed some not so good people to get elected to office, and they're just running amok with public policy. And here's the thing, sometimes public policies, they take a while to repeal or to disable. It just does. Because once the federal government gets a hold of a federal policy and starts implementing it, it's almost impossible to get the federal government to admit that it shouldn't be doing that. Just take a look at the Department of Defense. Look at how much they overspend, and they don't care to do what's right. But yet the Department of Defense and their employees, except for the contractors, they get amazing health care benefits that the majority of the United States does not get. So not only are they overpaid workers, a lot of them are unionized, they get cushy benefits that we pay for, and yet they have the nerve to complain about their work. And then they have waste and fraud, overspending of our money. If that's not being a thief, I don't know what is. So I hope and pray that the Department of Defense, that they start having audits every year, no matter how rough it is. You need to take the bull by the horns and handle this, and you need to have an internal and an external audit, and you need to acknowledge and accept the results. And you need to correct the corruption that is taking place in that agency, because there is no excuse for this, because this is the Department of Defense. They're supposed to be defending the United States, not spending our money like they're on a cruise ship. And that's basically what they're doing. I mean, they're just as bad as the IRS. Like, I remember back when Obama was president, there was a video that was released of these IRS workers. Like, they got to go to like some convention, and they were just overspending our money at this fancy hotel. And it's like, wow, that's what we're paying for. We're paying for them to go on a vacation, go to a hotel and just party it up. I mean, the IRS, when Obama was president, it was turned into something nothing short of a frat house. I mean, that's just how it was. And yet, Obama, under his Obamacare Act, he actually put the IRS in charge of implementing that law. Now, doesn't that show you the stupidity of his mindset and his leadership, or lack of leadership? He put some really bad people in charge of implementing the healthcare law. People that have no respect for American citizens. They have no respect for our tax dollars. And that's who he put in charge of the healthcare law. See, that's why you don't put incompetent people in charge of anything, but especially your country, because they put bad people in charge of things that they should never be in charge of. If anything, the IRS should be cut in half. I think they have too many employees, they overspend, and they over-target Americans. It's like, wow, I think we need to do better training here. So needless to say, we have a lot of federal agencies that need a lot of help, not our money. But I will go ahead and end this podcast. But as usual, until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. God bless, and bye-bye.